The Age of Unity had begun with such hope. After the war, humanity had resolved to rebuild itself anew, a world without borders, without greed, and without the divisions that had once driven us to destruction. For a time, it seemed to work. The World Council became a symbol of cooperation, a global body dedicated to the collective good. Cities began to rise again. Fields bloomed where radiation had once poisoned the soil, and the atom, once a harbinger of death, powered the birth of a new era. And yet, beneath the surface, the same cracks that had shattered the old world began to form once more. As much as we had promised ourselves that this time would be different, the truth became harder to ignore. Human nature does not change so easily. At first, the signs were subtle. Resources, though managed collectively, were still unevenly distributed. The rebuilt cities in wealthier regions flourished faster than those in poorer ones, and old rivalries, thought long buried, began to resurface. The World Council struggled to maintain balance, but its members were only human. Decisions made in the name of the greater good often left some communities feeling forgotten or exploited. I remember visiting a town on the edge of the desert, one of the many settlements still struggling to recover. The people there lived in tents and makeshift shelters, their water rationed and their crops barely sustaining them. One of the men I spoke to, a farmer named Luis, voiced the anger many felt. "They promised us equality," he said, gesturing toward the parched land. "But look around you. What do we have? We're no better off than we were before the war." Even as the council worked tirelessly to maintain the ideals of unity, it was clear that old inequalities were creeping back in. The cracks widened as dissent began to grow. At first, it was quiet, small protests, letters sent to the council, demands for more equitable resource distribution. But as frustrations mounted, the dissent turned into something darker. One group, calling themselves the Restorationists, began to push for the return of national sovereignty. They claimed that the council had become too powerful, that it was ruling the world from above without understanding the needs of ordinary people. "We gave up our nations for peace," their leader, a former military officer named Henrik, declared in a broadcast. "But what do we get in return? A government that doesn't listen, doesn't care, and doesn't serve." The Restorationists were not alone. Other factions emerged, each with their own grievances. Some demanded more autonomy for local communities, while others sought to re-establish old religions or cultural hierarchies. What they all had in common was a deep dissatisfaction with the fragile unity the council was trying to maintain. The council responded as best it could, sending envoys to negotiate and promising reforms. But for many, these efforts felt too little, too late. The dream of unity was beginning to falter. The atom, which had been central to both humanity's destruction and its recovery, once again became a symbol of division. The council had promised that atomic energy would never again be weaponized, but as tensions grew, rumors began to circulate. Some whispered that the Restorationists were building their own reactors in secret. Others claimed that rogue scientists were working on new, more devastating weapons. The council itself was not immune to the temptation of power. Faced with growing unrest, some of its members argued that a strong show of force was needed to maintain control. "We cannot allow dissent to tear us apart," one council member said during a heated debate. "If we lose unity, we lose everything." But others warned that any attempt to suppress dissent with violence would only reignite the cycle of destruction. "Have we learned nothing?" Sarah, now one of the most respected voices on the council, demanded. "The atom is not a tool for control. It is a reminder of what we are capable of, both the best and the worst." The breaking point came when an explosion rocked one of the council's largest atomic reactors. At first, it was believed to be an accident, a tragic failure of machinery. But evidence soon emerged suggesting sabotage. A faction of extremists, disillusioned with the council's rule, had planted the explosives, hoping to cripple the global energy network. The fallout was devastating. Entire regions were plunged into darkness, their power cut off overnight. Food supplies dwindled, communication networks collapsed, and the fragile infrastructure of the new world began to crumble. In the chaos that followed, local leaders declared their independence from the council, reigniting the very divisions we had sworn to overcome. I was in one of the cities affected by the blackout. The streets, once alive with the hum of atomic power, were eerily silent. People gathered in the dark, their faces lit by candles and makeshift fires. Fear hung in the air, not just of the present, but of the past, the memory of what had happened the last time humanity had turned on itself. "We can't let it happen again," someone whispered, but no one seemed to know how to stop it. In the midst of the turmoil, I found myself thinking of Holson. His discovery had changed the world in ways even he couldn't have imagined, but I often wondered if he would have called it progress. He had dreamed of a world set free, a world where the atom's power would elevate humanity beyond its petty conflicts. Instead, we had turned it into a weapon, then a tool, and now, once again, a source of division. I visited the ruins of his old laboratory once, long after the war. The walls were blackened, the equipment rusted and broken. But on his desk, still intact, I found a notebook filled with his writings. On the final page, in his precise handwriting, were these words: "The atom is not to blame. The fault lies within us. We must learn to wield power with wisdom, or we will destroy ourselves again and again." Despite everything, there were those who refused to give up on the dream. Sarah and a handful of others worked tirelessly to restore the council, calling for a renewed commitment to unity. Their efforts were met with resistance, but also with support from those who still believed in the possibility of a better world. I attended one of their gatherings in the rebuilt amphitheater. It was smaller than the first Congress, the crowd subdued and uncertain. But as Sarah spoke, her voice steady and determined, I felt a flicker of hope. "We have made mistakes," she admitted. "But we cannot let those mistakes define us. The dream of unity is not dead. It is fragile, yes, but so is all life. And like life, it is worth fighting for. The age of unity may have fractured, but its ideals endured." People began to rebuild again, not with the blind optimism of the past, but with a cautious, hard-earned wisdom. The dream of a world set free remained a dream, but it was one we continued to strive for.